an entity which is not determined by political exigency, but defined by a feeling of commonality that runs through centuries. To him, Indian literature is a unified universe, despite its various linguistic traditions. He mentioned several characteristics of Indian literature: texts where more than one language is used, styles grown out of interaction between two languages, bilingual authors, and literary movements cutting across geographical or linguistic areas. All of these point out to a continuous interaction between languages and a remarkable similarity in the response to socio-political changes and patterns of literary innovation all over the country. A history of Indian literature, thus declares, is a history of the total literary activity of the Indian people, an account of all literary traditions, great or little, their ramifications and changes, their recessions and revival, dominance and decline. I have quoted Shri Kumar Das at length because I find him most thoughtful, cogent, and persuasive in his arguments. Yet I think the language-literature equation is more important than he would allow it. Has he considered the viewpoint of a reader? I wonder. I love a certain literature because it is written in my language. I may love another literature even more, provided I have adequately acquired the language it is composed in. How can I treat equally another literature to the language of which I have no access? Treating all the literatures in India as one's own may be an ideal for an Indian, but will it be real to hold a literature dear to his heart without understanding a single word of it? India's linguistic pluralism gave rise to diversity in literature. True, its cultural inheritance weaves threads of commonality, even when the forces of the cycles mentioned by Chatterjee appear to have weakened over long periods of time. Both the cultural heritage and common experience of the milieu have resulted in similarity of expression, both in its matter and form. What has been termed as unity in diversity is real and not imaginary. While the diversities may move towards unity, their unity should leave enough room for the diversity to flower. J.M. Cohen's A History of Western Literature, 1956, provides us with a perfect example of this. When we talk of Western literature, we look at some commonality that flows, at least from the time of the Renaissance, within literatures as diverse as those of England, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Russia, and Scandinavia, with diversities again in each of them, without causing their separateness to be blurred. We grant at the same time that each of these literatures has its own history, its growth, its emphasis on a particular genre at a given period, and the flowering of its own creativity. We do not forget that it is essentially pluralistic in nature. The wood should not be lost for the trees, but the trees that make the wood should not be denied recognition either. What makes Indian literature is the sum of total of its plentiful literatures with their varied linguistic lineage, with their own peculiarities, and of course, with an overarching commonality of vision. Thank you.
Any question? Is there some? Yeah, please. No.
Hi, I think I'm audible to everybody now. My name is Rahul, and I heard you, Shastriji, first, and I heard eminent personalities, professors. There's so many questions in my mind. It's just that I can ask one question at a time, not just because I want to ask a question. So I think the way the country is going right now, or I think the way the subcontinent is going right now, this kind of a conference and a platform, of course, gives everybody an amazing opportunity to go for a change as well in terms of thoughts, thinking for the young generation of the country too, because they are the fourth or the fifth generation after independence. There are few things which I might ask individually or personally. What's your take probably on something called discovery of Saraswati River? Do you contemplate that to happen and be discussed over the period of next 2-3 days, sir? Because, yeah, please.
Whom are you addressing the question to?
Yes, I think the last gentleman.
Well,
Formulate your question once again.
I'm sorry?
You have to put your question once
Sure.
again in a clear, simple one sentence.
Fantastic. So I want to find out, sir, or I want to understand, when is it that we as a community would start to talk about the discovery of Saraswati River as well? Is there a possibility?
I mean, we can discuss those questions,
Okay.
but that was not what was put to us to talk about. That's a subject perhaps for another conference.
Okay.
Under the umbrella of Indology, of course, but not necessarily for this conference.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Now, Professor Irma Piovano. Yeah, please. Yeah, you would like to speak? Yeah, please. You come from the land of Tucci. Come from the land of Tucci.
Oh, we are going to the next session.
No, she's going to say something. Yeah, please.
So the Corresio achieved the publication of the Valmiki Ramayana in 1870. The financial support of the King Carlo Alberto and afterwards of the Piedmontese government is witnessed by a thick correspondence in which the essentially cultural and scientific subject intersect with the almost stifling Smeo Institute per medio for the medium and the Far East. The Institute, which published the editorial series Serie Orientale Roma and the scientific journal East and West, both renowned and appreciated by all the scholars. In fact, body studies in Italy would deserve a wider space. However, it is beyond our aim, and that is to offer a broad survey of early Indological studies starting from their cradle in Turin. When Rabindranath Tagore visited Turin in 1926, he met a young professor, Mario Vallauri, Oscar Botto's teacher, the most complete and eclectic Sanskrit scholar who excelled in scientific and philological thoroughness and critical perspicacity. He was professor in Turin from 1922 to 1961 and author of many philological works on classical literature, theater, politics, medicine, and ancient Indian science. He was a deep investigator of the essential in the evolution of the scientific, legal, and political thought, and in certain aspects of the cultural history of ancient India. Vallauri's two direct pupils were the eminent Indologist Carlo della Casa and Oscar Botto. Carlo della Casa was the director of the Institute of Linguistic and Eastern Studies of Milan University, author of important books on the Upanishad and Jainism. Oscar Botto succeeded to Mario Vallauri at the University of Turin and taught first Sanskrit, then Indology. He was professor of religion and philosophy of India and Far East from 1963 to 1974 and founded the Institute of Indology in 1963. The institute later became a department covering all Oriental studies. Oscar Botto was a director of this department until 1995. With his rare philological tournaments, Botto has studied poetry, drama, novels, epic, ancient law, politics, and Buddhism. In his works, Oscar Botto shows a wide variety of interests, which range over all Indian literature, from the epic to lyric poetry, from theater to art and dharma text. Among his many translations and works, we remind the Dasha Kumaracharita Purva Pitika of Vinayaka, on the basis of the works of Dandin, and the Kshemendra Dashavatari Charita, and the Upadeshashataka of Gumani, with explanatory notes and Italian analysis of the source. In the year from 1960 to 1969, he organized and directed a comprehensive history of Oriental literature in Italian languages in 4 big volumes. That was the first and the most important study published till that time in this field. In the series, he has authored the volume on ancient Indian literature. Both today's consulted and studied. Botto's works on ancient Indian polity are devoted to the analysis of the 4th and 5th chapter of the Arthashastra, the role of the minister and the counselor in ancient India. These researches led to the publication of the Nidhi Vakyamrita of Somadeva Suri. And in the field of Buddhism, he has written an outstanding book on Buddha and Buddhism, which was published in 1974, but is still read and reprinted. Professor Botto founded Indologica Taurinensia, a yearly journal, one of the most prestigious Indological journals, official organ of the International Association of Sanskrit Studies, acknowledged as a journal of high cultural value by the Italian Ministry of Culture. The volume, number 40, is in press. He founded the Corpus Juris Sanskriticum, a series on social and religious law of India, Southeast and Central Asia. It is published under the scientific patronage of the Union Académique Internationale and the Italian National Academy Union. In the year 2000, was awarded the prize Ikuo Hirayama by the Académie des Inscriptions et Belles Lettres de l'Institut de France. 9 volumes are already published. 2 other ambitious projects of Oscar Botto were the compilation of the first Sanskrit-Italian dictionary, published in 2009, and the new translation of the Valmiki Ramayana, which is ready to be published. Oscar Botto founded also the Italian Association of Sanskrit Studies, and now the presidency, after the demise of Professor Botto, the president was taken by Professor Boccali in Milan, and now and recently Professor Torella in Rome. In 1982, he founded the CESMEO, International Institute for Advanced Asian Studies, to support the university, which, owing to a more active structure, has opened up much wider opportunities and new perspectives for researchers, studies, and events. Besides language schools, seminars, conference events, CESMEO publishes the reports of specific research when the result can significantly contribute to the development of science, and the series Orientalia, mostly concerning the field of art. The Institute houses a rich and specialized library on Oriental studies, which is connected with the online Italian national catalog. It owns about 40,000 volumes and is named Oscar Botto Oriental Library. Among many awards, he received the most prestigious and which he liked very much was the Premio Nazionale del Presidente della Repubblica Italiana and the degree of Vidya Rashtrapati honoris causa of the Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri Rashtriya Sanskrit Vidyapita of New Delhi, and the degree of Dr. Literarum honoris causa of the Banaras Hindu University, and the degree Doctor honoris causa of the Russian Academy of Science, Moscow. The glorious tradition of Indological studies and the path traced by Corresi and Vallauri have been pursued by both Vallauri's pupils Carlo della Casa and Oscar Botto, and presently by their respective pupils who are teaching the principal Italian university or making researches in university center. The most meaningful realities are represented by the current of the philological criticism applied to the different fields of the linguistics: Sanskrit, religious literature, Kavya, Indo-law, and Buddhist religion.
So, it's a major crisis, not only in Indology or of academics, but the relationship of the human beings and nature. The relationship of how the political structures can correspond to the needs of human life. I preside over 2 government institutions. And what do I see? There is no human element. There are too many rules and regulations. I have to follow rules and regulations. I know they are not conducive to what I would love to do. So the whole question is, what is important? The values, the great legal systems that have been created, but there is no justice in those law. The Romans made a distinction between law and justice. Law for the citizens of the empire, subjects of the empire, justice for the free citizens of Rome. It's such a clear value distinction. So, the whole question resolves around one simple thing, that what is the future going to be? Are we just going to be money beings, or we will also like to be human beings? Will there be an end to human development? I think there has to be an end. You can't go on like this. Nature will not sustain it. Even if we go on, nature will not sustain it. The great experiment that we are being carried under the earth, creating all these seismic explosions, the tsunamis, they have all to be thought of, the terrorism. So, it's a decline of values. I don't think just Indology, but part of a larger whole. And unless we correlate the study of the classical values, I don't call it the classical past. For me, they are values. What is not necessary is gone. For example, I don't go on a bullock cart. I don't go on a horse. I have never been on a horse except in the Himalayas. I use modern gadgets, use modern conveyances. But at the same time, from the classical traditions, we have certain values which are even relevant today. The classical man lived with nature. He did not live only with himself. He was not selfish, to put it in very vulgar terms. So we have to think about the future of the value systems of the world. And when we do that, the classical studies will emerge. During the Renaissance, it was not just the Renaissance of the natural sciences, but it was also a renaissance of the classical traditions, out of which came the parliaments, came the democracies, kingdoms were gone, many things happened. Now the question is whether democracies will have to undergo a change or not. So the whole effort of, at least for me personally in Indology, is to see the relevance of what we have written down in the past. How do we relate to it? Not in the context of something gone, but what in the context of something to come. How do I relate to nature? Do I cut all my trees? Do I cut all my forests in the Himalayas for development? Question. Many of my friends, they would cling to trees so that they are not cut down by the government. We have Shiva Raksha in Thailand, who drapes the trees in the dresses of the monks and says they are monks. They are as precious as monks. Don't cut them. For me, that is also a part of Indology, part of Buddhist studies. The relevance of our studies to life. When I speak at the end, I will make more comments, but what we have assembled here today is